Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Long time no see. After RPG A Day was done, I kind of took a little break from making videos because that was quite a breakneck pace and didn't put anything on my blog either. And I felt kind of bad, like I really would like to start doing both of those again, but it's kind of one of those things where you get out of practice. And I started to feel like I lost a bit of my mojo. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to talk about. And I had a lot of half-formed ideas. So I figured I'd just kind of wait for a little while. And something came up a little while ago. I watched a video by Sameoldji on his channel, and he talks with Anthony, with Runeslinger, and it's a pretty long video. It's an hour and a half long. It's a great video. It's called A Discussion on Ways to Play, because Sameoldji's been making this series about ways to play, some procedures that he particularly likes. And he makes it really clear this is not saying that you have to do it this way. These are just some procedures that work pretty well. These are some standard best practices that he's found work really well for him. Anyhow, one of the things they talked about in that at one particular point was rulings over or in the absence of rules, roar, and the fact that you can play a game rules as written, raw, but still have those moments where you do a little roaring and as well. But I want to talk about house rules or hacks, and from a different perspective for a second. Because I was thinking about it as I watched this video, and as we had various discussions about running things rules as written, but also thinking about some of the things that Ron Edwards and some other people have said about like the real rules of your table, or you have the visible rule books and the invisible rule books, the other things that kind of make their way into your culture of play, so to speak. And just thinking about stuff that I experienced, in my own gaming life. When I played with certain groups where maybe we played a game which didn't have a lot of procedure built into it, in terms of characterization or who narrates what or what have you, but depending on where you played, who you played with, you started to develop these cultures of play. Later on there were games that actually wrote those in and codified them. But anyhow, this video isn't exactly about that. But I was thinking about it for a second, like what, when you change a game, when you do something, when you add, subtract, whatever. So what are you doing? Well, first thing is you're subtracting or ignoring some kind of rules. You're deciding that we're going to play first edition D&D and we don't want to use weapons versus armor class or speed factor. We don't want to use those rules. Or whatever happens to be. Pick your particular game where there's a rule that you just don't particularly like for whatever reason. And as a group you decide we're not going to use this particular rule. We're not going to use the party caller. And I'm going to make a video about the party caller at some point because that's a pretty fascinating subject. The second thing you can do is change or modify an existing rule. You swap one out for another. You decide, and well, this is all of a sudden becoming a D&D video. I really didn't want it to be, but the idea that you're playing something like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and they're using the standard old 5 saving throws, and you decide, well, I don't want to do that. I want to use just a single target number, like something like Swords and Wizardry does, or actually. There's some great examples in this little book right here that I actually backed for Free RPG Day, and James Edward Raji actually has a whole bunch of alternate, like house rules, kind of like playtest rules for the game in here in terms of different ways to do saving throws, different ways to run combat, for skills, for how to roll for hit points, what the ability scores actually mean. There's some really great stuff in here. But in this particular case, what he's done is he's changed or modified. He's taken out an existing rule and put something else in instead. So that's a different thing you can do. And finally, last but not least, is you can add a rule or a procedure, either permanently or on an ad hoc basis. And that is more, I believe, of what Anthony and Sameoldji were talking about, the idea that you can still not screw with a game, but if it's silent on a particular point, then you can add something in. It could be simply a procedure. How do we handle, Francois Letarte was talking about the other day about the Semican Kingdom game that we played in when we played, oh man, I forget the game system now, but it didn't have any rules for drowning. And so we had to kind of make up his own little rules for drowning. Fortunately, my character did not drown because it was getting really close to her, getting into some serious trouble that day. You have some kind of, either you make it up ad hoc or you decide, we're going to use this particular thing here because the game doesn't have that. And I was thinking about it too. You have to kind of differentiate between rules and procedures, because a lot of what Sameoldji is talking about in his series aren't really rules, they're procedures. Then you think about some of the stuff that he's been talking about, and I would encourage you to go watch that series because it's a pretty cool and thought-provoking series. the idea that you can do things like such as the GM narrates failures, the players narrate success. That's a built-in codified rule in something like Star Wars, Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars, all those particular games, in that series. But it's not in a lot of other games. Some cultures of play, people did it. It doesn't necessarily say anything in the rules in a lot of games. Who narrates what. However, I know, or at least I think. I'm going to go back at some of my old games and look. There is kind of that implied idea that the game master would adjudicate the results of pretty much everything, and they would pretty much tell you what happened. So in that case, is this an addition, or are we now modifying the procedure at that particular point? A game like this, Uncharted Worlds, one of these Powered by the Apocalypse games, it's a little atypical in a lot of ways. I really like it. But one of the things it says is to respect the boundaries. And as a player, it encourages the game master to ask the players, okay, tell me what's up with this. Tell me why you have trouble with this faction. Tell me what's going on with this non-player character. But it also makes it really clear to the players that you're not supposed to invent facts about the universe unless the game master specifically asks you to, which is different than a lot of other games in that kind of ilk or genre or type, where in many cases, even when we're playing in the Veil, we're kind of encouraged and supposed to make up facts about the universe without even being asked. Or are we? Is that something that's really in those rules? I'll have to go back and look. It's possible it is, it's possible it isn't. It becomes kind of culture of play. Did we just kind of add a procedure in that game that might not be there? I have to go look. I'm not sure, one way or the other. But that's, some of the things that I've been thinking about. What is the point of this video at the end of the day? I'm not really sure. But I believe you have to think about it. Are we talking about actual rules, or are we talking about actual procedures? Are we going to use a party caller or not use a party caller? Are we going to subtract something out of the game we don't like and replace it with nothing? Are we going to take one mechanic out and put another one in because I like the way this works a little bit better? Or one procedure out and put another procedure in? Or are we going to add something, a procedure or a rule into the game because we realize or we feel that it lacks something that we want it to have? So, anyhow, not really sure where this, what the final point of this video is, but it was something that I was thinking about, and it's something that I think probably deserves a little bit closer attention, especially when you're talking about altering games or trying to play games as close to rules as written, but having those other invisible rules, the actual culture of play at your particular table. So, anyhow, food for thought. Have a good one, kids.